Hello. Thanks for being here. When I was trying to figure out how to structure this stream today, I had already decided that I was going to do the teacher story because one of the great things about starting a new YouTube channel is that it gives you a pristine, crystal clear feed. And so you can train the algorithm to send you material that is of interest to you. Hi Dee, hi Artem, hi Breeze, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Which means that all that vile, disgusting content involving Girl World and all that crap is elsewhere. It's not, hello Moon and Stars, it's not here. And so I am getting really, really good content suggested to me by content creators I've never heard of. And this one popped up. I was up at around 6, sitting around, drinking my coffee. And I was scrolling through my recommended and I saw this video and I thought, wow, this is a really good video. But then I thought, how am I going to talk about the Lauren Chen story? And that is, hi Anna, and that is the breaking news story, is the Lauren Chen story. And it's in many ways, it's not more important, but it's more exciting. And then I thought, hey IDGAF, and then I thought, what the hell is my problem? This is not a TV news program where I have to be really conscious of the story order that I cover. So I'm going to start with the teacher thing. And I'm going to go on to Lauren Chen. Hey, Nietzsche. Hi, Lydia. Because the Lauren Chen story is really in a class by itself. All right. Lots of scandal. All right. So, as you all know, hi, Talyu. Thank you very much, Talyu. I appreciate that. And I also wanted to say a separate thank you because I was on the channel last night with Negs. And I had a lot to say, so if you missed it, please do go back to yesterday's stream. And I pop in, I don't remember where. I mean, the whole stream is good, but if you want to hear what I had to say, it's all there. But what I wanted to say also, which I said last night, but I want to say again, is I want to thank from the bottom of our hearts the people who have been so generous with Cash Apps. I am really, really grateful to all of you. You have been very kind, very, very generous with us. And I do appreciate it. And I'm glad that you are, that you think that funding our unmonetized so far channel is worth it. And I'm glad because that means that you're enjoying our content and that is great. So thank you. And I also wanted to say hello to all the new subscribers. Hello. We're up to, the last time I checked, we have 700 subscribers in 2 weeks. That's not bad. Not bad at all. And so I wanted to say hello to everyone who is a new person. I hope you stay. And I hope you learned something. All right, so we're going to get started with the teacher content, and then afterwards we'll move on to Lauren Chen. So let me bring up this video. The channel is called TinySey, S-E-Y. It's linked in the description, and it's a really good channel. So I would advise everybody to go and subscribe to her. She's a wonderful content creator. And I thought that what she had to say in this video was worth taking a look at. So let's take a look.
Remembers Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. That was such an amazing show. And honestly, she was the teacher that we all wished we had. But even Miss Frizzle would be ready to throw in the towel if she had to be in one of these modern day classrooms.
On the daily, teachers are getting cussed out, spit on, hit, flipped off. Their equipment is getting broken and stolen. There are bullies in class that are relentless, not just to their own fellow students, but to the adult in the room.
Teachers are mistreated by students, they're overworked, and they're underpaid, and it's leading to a serious shortage of teachers. So let's dive into why so many of our modern day frizzles are calling it quits. What's up, YouTube? It's TinySey, and welcome to
TinySey,
my
sorry.
digital garden. So it turns out a lot of teachers are just done, and I'm talking like out the door done, and I can't even blame them. Through the research I've been doing for this video, I'm realizing how unappreciated the teaching profession is.
Yep.
They're basically dodging desks and chairs from the students in the classroom, and then they have to go and deal
Cheryl.
with their out-of-touch parents who definitely don't help the situation. I have also worked as an after-school teacher myself and have since left that field, and let me tell you, I've seen some things. I've dealt with some things, and I completely can empathize with what a lot of these teachers are saying. It's tough out there for teachers. They're constantly giving, sticking their neck out to protect their students, only to get mistreated in return. And speaking of protection, there's another way we can protect ourselves,
Okay,
and that's
sorry.
with online security. And that's where today's sponsor, Surfshark,
No,
comes
sorry.
in. Just like and this is something that they're required to complete if they want to get their teaching credential. And although they saw a decrease, it used to be an average of about 700,000. Now they see that it's at 600,000 prospective teachers each year. But the crazy part is that only 159,000 of them are actually completing these courses in the first place. So they aren't able to output the amount of teachers necessary to even fill some of these positions in the first place. And this is probably also contributing to the shortage in a lot of these areas, a lot of these states and districts. But what's really even deterring these teachers from the teaching profession in the first place? What's making them quit? One of the biggest things that we are seeing called out from these teachers is the behavior of these students. And that seems to be the number one issue that is causing them to quit, sometimes in the middle of lessons.
Okay, I had a friend in college who was also a 930 Club denizen, who, after getting his master's degree in English, signed up for Teach for America. And Teach for America is a great program. I hope it's still going on. And he was sent to the Bronx. And he said that he had to sort of establish himself as the alpha in the classroom the first day. I mean, he goes in there with all of his tattoos, and the kids try to, confront him, and they try to not overpower him physically, but they try to intimidate him and frighten him and all this. And he put his foot down, and he was very strict with them. And he said that his experiences working as a bouncer at several nightclubs around DC was helpful, not in terms of like physically attacking them or putting them down or having to restrain them or anything, but because he had learned how to deal with a certain personality type, belligerent people, people who won't take no for an answer, people who don't do as they're told. And he said that by the end of his first semester, the students adored him, because for many of them, it was the first time in their lives that they had a male role model in their lives, a man who was there to help them, because most of these kids came from homes with no fathers. And also that they were being given structure for the first time in their lives, and they were running into a teacher who actually gave a damn about the people he was teaching. And he ended up becoming a public school teacher for many, many years. He taught at a community college, and Teach for America was a great experience. But the thing is that when he went into that job, he knew that he was going to be assigned to probably a very poor, very dangerous part of the country, and that it was going to be a challenge. The problem is that what we're finding now is that you're not only seeing these behavioral issues in what we would write off as like, oh, inner city schools, underfunded schools, whatever. You have teachers coming forward who teach at private schools, expensive private schools, who are running into these same problems. Bad behavior, inability to focus, literacy issues. It's very, very sad. Very sad. And the question is why. But let's continue with the video.
Middle of teaching, they're just done. They're over it.
I'm walking right out the door. I won't ever be back.
Some of these teachers are even saying that it's causing them trauma, like they are waking up in the middle of the night with nightmares, and no one wants to be in a profession that's causing them night terrors.
I made the decision not to return to the classroom this year, and I haven't been in a classroom for months now, and I still have nightmares,
That's awful.
trauma nightmares on a weekly basis about my former classroom and my former student.
That's horrible. I would leave too.
That is horrible.
Actually, I left. I did leave. So let's watch this video about a teacher of 5 years that decided that she is done.
Those of you who are not in education are aware of what's happening in schools, but it's not easy. I don't think people truly understand what teachers are going through. Lots of children are not told no at
Right.
home, which makes my job extremely difficult when it comes to having them hold accountability for their actions and their mistakes and following directions and keeping their hands to themselves.
And this is a reoccurring thing that I've been seeing in a lot
Yep.
of the videos that I'm going to show. They often talk about how these students are not being taught properly at home. And no
Right.
is like the most basic thing. If they don't even understand no, if they don't know that basic boundary, how is a teacher supposed to do their job?
Exactly.
How are they supposed to establish any boundaries with the kids? It's impossible, essentially. It's not possible.
This year, I have been cursed at by both students and parents. I have been hit, punched repeatedly.
Unbelievable.
Punched repeatedly is just like absolutely crazy, because that's where I'm pretty sure a lot of people would draw the line when it becomes physical. And the fact that she says hit, punched multiple times, this is not a one-off occurrence. And when it gets to the point that your students are putting hands on you, I imagine that that's definitely when you start to think that maybe this isn't for you. I never got hit or punched when I was an after school teacher, but the verbal abuse was enough for me to want to quit. And so I can only imagine if I was also getting hit. Like that would have been the
Imagine.
last day. Definitely giving resignation on the table that day. And the fact that
100%.
students feel comfortable to do that and interact in that way with their teachers nowadays, it doesn't really make any sense.
And the administrators are not doing jack shit about it. If some kid struck me in a classroom, I would call the police. I wouldn't go through the principal's office. I wouldn't go through any channels, the counseling center, whatever. I would call the police. And this is what's not happening. We saw that problem here at the middle school, where kids would threaten each other. Kids would threaten each other with guns. I mean, not on the premises, but threaten to bring an older sibling or an older boyfriend from the high school to come and shoot someone just because they had, a disagreement over something trivial. And the administration, I mean, the problem that the administrators are facing is that if it has to do with an underage kid, then they cannot divulge the information of disciplinary acts or police involvement or anything to other parents. They can't do that. It's illegal. So if you are the parent of a kid who's being bullied relentlessly or threatened, and you go to the administration and you say, what the hell are you doing about it? They're like, oh, it's being taken care of. Are they taking care of it? We have no way of knowing. But what we do have a way of knowing is whether or not anybody gets expelled. And what I'm noticing in what's consistent with all these stories that are being told by these teachers, these kids are not being expelled. They're not even being sent to, study hall, or they're not being sent to the principal's office. There are no consequences for these kids. There are no consequences at home, and there are no consequences in school. So what do you expect kids to learn from that? What do you expect them to learn? They can get away with anything, and nothing is going to happen. Let's continue.
It does break my heart that I am walking away for something that I went to school with and had so much passion for, but that passion is gone. I parent more than I do teach. I'm gonna leave that at that.
And that's like a big point, that I parent more than I do teach.
Right.
That's not a teacher's job. They're not
No.
supposed to be parents. Their job is to educate the students. And so if they're also having to be a parent, AKA teach them boundaries, teach them no, teach them basic discipline and behaviors, then that takes away time from them actually being able to teach them to read, teach them math. It's just sad that teachers like this who have been in the field for 5 years, who were passionate, probably at one point really was excited to do this, that they have to walk away.
That's the thing that bothers me the most, actually, is that a lot of the teachers that I see uploading TikToks or uploading YouTube shorts are young teachers. They're young. They've only been in the profession for a few years. They're not the teachers who have been around since the year one, who burn out and say, that's it, I'm leaving. They're young teachers, and they can't take the stress, and they can't take the constant criticism from the kids, the parents, in some cases physical violence. Nicole talked about a teacher getting doxxed by a parent. What is that? And it's frightening because it is not considered to be a respectable profession anymore, not in that people don't respect what teachers do. It's that they expect teachers to work miracles, and they don't give them the resources that they need, not only in terms of school supplies and things like that, but also the backing that they need when they have kids in the classroom who cannot perform and who are violent and fresh and don't do as they're told and can't sit still and can't focus. The illiteracy rate among Gen Alpha is terrifying to me. It is terrifying to me, and I cannot believe that it has gotten to this point. Let's continue.
Because of the way that students are behaving, parents are behaving, and sometimes even the school. That brings me to the next video that I found, which was around how the school behaves when certain behaviors are going on. And it feels like they don't even care.
Mom said I had the right to beat your ass.
And this is one of the reasons why I quit. After a degree, after clinicals, after 5 years of teaching, one of those reasons is why I quit. And what had happened was I had a difficult student who he would come in high, he would sleep all class period, wrote him up. Admin did absolutely nothing.
Of course.
To a point to where some admin were deleting my referrals,
Wow.
deleting them. I would go back in and they would be gone for multiple students. And my last straw was the same kid. We were about to read. The audio was for 10 minutes and 16 seconds. 10 minutes and 16 seconds, I was asking students to put their phone away. And I kept asking him, and he wouldn't oblige. And he turns around to me, and he says, "You annoying as fuck."
Wow.
That day, I put in all my sick time. I put my 2 weeks in. I walked out. I ain't been back since. My stuff's still sitting in that desk. Y'all can kiss my ass.
It's
Good
it's
for
a
you.
crazy story because she's actively
Hi,
being
Brandy.
sabotaged. She's trying to ask for this admin support, right? Maybe suspension, whatever it is, for them to help her discipline her student, and they would rather sabotage her.
Right.
And this is something that I saw in multiple videos. And the reason that I found that they do this from some articles that I read was because they want to make sure that their school looks good. And so the less, I guess, demerits, or I
Right.
don't know what people do nowadays, but whatever she meant by I would send referrals in, I'm guessing it's like demerits or how many kids are getting suspended. They'd rather there be less of that so that their school looks good. And when the authority figure in the room is allowed to be disrespected, that just causes a chain reaction.
Correct.
And now they know that they can walk all over this teacher. What's happening to the education system that they would rather care about how it looks on the outside rather than care about their employees, which is honestly the reason why the school's even functioning in the first place. And another huge theme that we're seeing is that students are getting violent. We already touched on it with that other teacher that quit after 5 years.
And I wanted to interject something here. This is another reason why I think the police are not investigating porch mail thefts and stolen cars or stolen property the way they used to. It's because all of these police departments, I know this certainly is the case in DC, I don't know about anywhere else, they want the crime stats to show that certain types of crime are going down. And the way you do that is you don't investigate. You take a police report and then you do nothing about it. Or you don't even take a report at all. Somebody calls and says, my phone has been stolen. I know where it is. Would you please go get it? And they're like, no, we don't have the personnel. We don't have the staff. It's all bullshit. It's all a way for these government agencies to be able to tweak the stats so that they don't lose funding, so that they don't get hauled in front of Congress or in front of the city council, and they don't get the mayor calling them up on the phone. So it's all fiddling around with numbers, and ultimately what happens is that you end up getting a very skewed view of what actually constitutes reality in terms of crime figures, in terms of, in this case, kids being disciplined, kids getting pushed through the system, social promotion, which is a disaster. It's been going on for years. And you end up with kids who graduate not being able to read or write or do simple math. It's an absolute disgrace. And the teachers are screwed. Absolutely screwed.
But students are assaulting their teachers. They are hitting their teachers. And it's not okay.
My first year teaching was, I came in the middle of the school year as a long-term sub. And my kids had hit their teacher in the face with a stapler.
Wow.
And she walked out. It was her first year teaching. And she quit at the beginning of October. So she made it August, September. She quit at the beginning of October. In August, somebody got to fighting. She tried to break it up. They pushed her into the Promethean board, broke the board. And then in September, somebody threw a stapler across the room and hit her in the face. And so she didn't come back. I'm like, I can't blame you. But the first conversation that I had when I got it, don't throw nothing across this room. Because the teacher y'all had ain't the teacher you got right now.
Good for you.
Nothing but not hit me in the face. That wasn't even me. I didn't ask. The first person to say that wasn't me. It was you.
Throwing a
Right?
stapler at a teacher is crazy. And I don't know how this sort of behavior is
Hey, Rochester.
allowed, but I completely understand why this causes teachers to quit.
You know what's funny? This exact thing happened to me. This exact thing happened to me last year. That's one of the reasons why my car is so fucked up. It wasn't a hit and run, but a guy ran a stop sign, crashed into the front end of my car. The guy was uninsured. And I called the police to take an accident report, and they're like, no, we're not going to show up. Just call your insurance company. And I said, well, but the insurance company needs a police report. They're like, no, they don't. We're not coming. This is a fairly new thing. It's a recent phenomenon. But yeah, I mean, this is happening all over the place. All over the place. Where it's like police departments have decided that there are certain things that they are no longer going to dispatch officers to respond to. And it sucks.
She was only there for 2 months, and it sounded like there was multiple occurrences of violence against her. Honestly, kudos to her for lasting more than one occurrence. These people are actually really passionate about this. They want to help these students. They want to be teachers. It seems as though these students are allowed to come back into the classroom and repeat these behaviors over and over because administration doesn't want to do anything too severe, doesn't want to kick them out, recommend them to maybe a different, more strict school. Like, they don't want to do these things for, I guess, public reasons. They don't want their school to look bad. But again, it's on the shoulders of these teachers. And something that we're also seeing is Gen Alpha specifically being called out. I know that Gen Z, some of the younger Gen Z are still in school, but something that we're definitely seeing a rise in is Gen Alpha getting called out for so many things. Their reading ability, them being on the internet, them being into skincare too young. There's a lot of concerning things that are starting to happen with this generation, especially their behaviors in the classroom. Some teachers talk about how working with Gen Alpha was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the reason that they decided, I'm quitting. So
Congratulations, millennials. This is your fault. These are your kids. These are your kids. Maybe instead of bitching and crying when you were in college and grad school about trigger warnings and wanting to be wrapped in bubble wrap and needing to have puppies and kittens brought onto campus or needing safe rooms because some uncomfortable subject was being discussed somewhere on campus that you weren't even listening to or watching. Now, this is what you've done to your children. And now the rest of us are going to have to pay for it. Because eventually, your kids are the ones who are going to go into the workplace. And older workers are going to have to supervise them. And it is going to be a fucking disaster. I did not know that Gen Alpha was a quarter of the world's population. That is terrifying.
Let's see some of the concerning things Gen Alpha specifically is doing in the classroom.
I've been teaching for like 10 years. I've been in the game for 10 years. And before that, I was a teaching assistant. So I've been in it even longer than 10 years. One thing that I'm noticing, this generation Alpha, bloody hell, they are a piece of work. And I'm seeing some teachers in America saying this, but so I work in year 2 and oh my God, I feel victimized by some of these 6 and 7 year olds.
Amazing.
Like they don't listen. They're violent as hell. Their academic abilities are so much lower than I've seen in my previous teaching years. They're helpless. You ask a question, they're just staring at you. They still can't form their letters. Like
Amazing.
before, in a class of 30, you might have had maybe 5 or 6 students that, you know, needed support to access the curriculum. Now it's like the other way around. You have 5 or 6 students that can access the curriculum, and then the rest of the class really struggles.
One thing that's really catching my attention
Terrifying.
is that a lot of them need help. They're helpless. Like that's the first time I heard that word come up, helpless. Like they just stare at you when you ask them a question.
I must know your name.
My name?
Yes, your name, son.
Beef Wellington?
No, your name.
The fork on the left?
Stop joking. Tell him your name.
My name? What's his name? What's his name? I got nothing on a name. Come on, baby, what's the name?
There's probably a lot of reasons that students aren't performing at the grade level that they should be. It could be because their parents aren't checking their work when they get home. They might not be actively interested in where their students are.
Can I just say, Moon and Stars, I have to firmly and respectfully disagree with you. There are kids growing up in countries around the world that grow up in war zones. There are kids who grow up under the worst conditions imaginable. Kids who have to walk to and from school for miles at a time. Kids who go to schoolrooms that are, you know, mud floors with under the worst possible circumstances, where it is especially dangerous for girls to go to school, where there's nowhere for girls to go to the bathroom. There's nowhere for girls to go change their sanitary napkins. And those kids can read and write. Those kids can read and write. So, I mean, I tend to be very suspicious when I see people automatically say that, oh, it's COVID. No, it's because kids in the West are soft, because the parents are not paying attention, because the parents are expecting to take their kids who don't know how to read and write because they don't read and write in the home. They're not being taught those skills in the home. They push them off into the school system, and now the teachers have to deal with them. And a lot of the kids that they're talking about here were babies during COVID. COVID was what? 4 years ago. So to say that a 7-year-old can't read because of something that happened 4 years ago, no, absolutely not. Did it harm the social interaction aspect? Yeah, I am willing to say yes, absolutely. A lot of parents were not equipped to homeschool their kids. A lot of the homeschooling that was available was inadequate. I totally agree. But that does not mean that you can't take your little kid and take Aesop's Fables or Just So stories or The Grasshopper and the Ant or some very basic story or even fairy tales, sit down with the kid and read along with them. There are too many kids now who are young, who were born after COVID, who still cannot read and write. And that to me is madness. It's crazy. And also, it's the techniques that parents are using now, this gentle parenting trend. I don't know if she's going to bring it up, so I'm going to wait and see if she talks about it, and then I'll discuss it at the end.
Personally, I was doing so much outside of school to make sure that I was at my grade level. I was constantly reviewing my times tables.
Because school and
Oh,
learning
the
is
times
where it's
tables.
at. You gotta listen and study and do your part so you can get off to a real good start. You need a good start in this world today. You gotta exercise your mind and that's okay. Turn the TV up and the videos too. Your mind is where it's at and it's up to you. Oh, rapping with the fast.
I did all of those hooked on phonics type things, like
Right.
a bunch of educational games. Do parents still do that sort of thing with their children? Because it helped me. These
No.
are the sorts of things that parents have to be doing. But also, if teachers aren't able to spend most of the time teaching, whether that's because they're reprimanding other students
Right.
or just because they have to constantly help people get up to speed, it takes time away from getting them to where they need to be. They're perpetually trying to catch up.
Janine.
And it's just like impossible. A lot of people also blame it on the fact that they're addicted to technology. They're iPad kids,
That's
as they
another
say.
problem.
And potentially kids being too addicted to these technologies and the parents not stepping in to restrict the amount of time that they have access to this. This can lead to their grades suffering. I won't say that technology is the only reason their grades
It
are bad,
isn't.
because I mean, we also had video games. We also loved to play. At the end of the day, I'll chalk it up to my parents and other people's parents being more active in their kids' education and
Right.
making sure that they were actually learning, completing their work, and limiting the amount of time that you had to play and also be on the game or be on the computer. And so something that we're seeing is illustrated really well in this report. And so this is nces.ed.gov. They found that the average reading scores were 220 and 263 for 4th and 8th grade students, respectively. So it feels like that's very close in scoring for a 4th grader and an 8th grader.
That's really
it's
bad.
almost at the same level.
Right.
So it's also saying in 2019, some 35% of 4th grade students and 34% of 8th grade students performed at or above NAEP proficient. Not even half of them are performing at or above.
That's terrifying.
Not even 50. That's crazy. So they break it up by poverty level, English language learner status, and of course this affects their scoring. If they're higher poverty schools, then they have even lower scores. Difference is not that much. And probably because of the teaching shortage, among a whole plethora of other factors, these students are just falling through the cracks and it's not getting any better
But
for
there are
them.
too many
And
of
this
them,
teacher
though.
also went viral talking about how his students were not reading at the grade level or just performing in general at the grade level that they should be.
I'm not even trying to be funny, but these kids are, I'm gonna just say this. I teach 7th grade, they are still performing on the 4th grade level. I don't care how you flip it, turn it, swing it, swindle it. They still performing on the 4th grade level.
I've seen this guy before, and I think he may be one of my favorite teachers in the entire country. And this is the other thing I want to point out. I think that these teachers that are uploading these videos, I have a feeling that they're good teachers, and they went into the profession for the right reasons. And they want to do the right thing, and you can really sense their frustration in these videos, and it's really heartbreaking.
Nobody talking about how they just keep moving, passing them on. They just keep passing them on, 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 passing them on. I can put as many zeros in this grade book as I want to. They're gonna move that child to the 8th grade next year.
Yep.
Ain't nobody talking about that.
And so he's illustrating the fact that it's also the schools, it's partly on the school's
right.
responsibility that they're passing these children onto the next grade level, even if they're being failed. Being held back was 100% a thing. If you were not reading at your level, you would be held back.
Right.
Or you'd be moved into another classroom to where they can teach you at a slower rate. But if they are no longer using those methods to make sure that you're up to speed, then yeah, you're going to be in 7th grade reading at a 4th grade level because your parents haven't intervened, the school's not intervening anymore for whatever reason. Maybe too many parents complained, but now here we are.
Good question.
A point that we're really seeing brought up and brought up and brought up is the parents. And I think it's because that's really what it boils down to. What is happening at home that this is being allowed? So
Right.
one thing that a lot of people bring up is the whole gentle
Oh,
parenting
good.
thing.
She's gonna talk
So
about
I
it.
looked into it to really figure out what this is all about. This is essentially what is gentle parenting. And according to parents.com, patient, calm, and punishment free, gentle parenting is an evidence based approach that focuses on empathy, respect, understanding, and boundaries. And so, according to some people in comment sections, they were like, gentle parenting and permissive parenting is being mixed up. According to parents.com, it says punishment free. Okay, so gentle parenting is a means of parenting without shame, blame, or punishment. It's
Okay, I have a question about this because this is very, very popular with millennial parents. I want to know what it is that Gen X did that was so horrible to the millennials that they have decided to take this approach. Because the last time I checked, at least the millennials can read and write. And Gen X, I mean, we were famous for being latchkey kids, for being left alone because both of the parents were working out of the home. And we got into a lot of mischief. And people complained that we watched too much TV and we were slackers and so on, which is nonsense. However, or maybe we did watch too much TV, whatever. But we could read and write. So how is it that you make the transition from Gen X parenting the millennials, and maybe the millennials, you know, not liking all this discipline, and so basically raising their kids as free range in a way, and their kids cannot read and write? This is a problem. This is a real problem. So, okay, let's continue with this gentle parent. I'm very interested in this gentle parenting thing because there's a lot of agreement that the gentle parenting fad is largely to blame, as far as the home is concerned, for why these kids are so poorly behaved and why they're such underachievers.
centered on partnership, as both parents and children have a say in this collaborative style. Gentle parenting is as it sounds. It is a softer, gentler approach to parenting. And parents and caregivers that practice gentle parenting do so by guiding their children with consistent, compassionate boundaries, not a firm hand. It's a collaboration between the parents and the children. And it feels as though there are a lot of benefits, and I see how this can be something really good to teach them that they have their own say and so on and so forth. I think the reason why people are maybe pointing to gentle parenting when it comes to the classroom is that, again, there's no punishment and there's no hard boundaries. But unfortunately, in the world, there are punishments, there are boundaries, there are things that aren't going to go our way, and a teacher has to do these things in order for the classroom to run. You can't talk back. This isn't a collaboration, right? This is the teacher doing their job, which is educating children, and the students behaving and being respectful and allowing the teacher to do the job.
Wow, we've really come a long way since Nanny 911 and Super Nanny, haven't we? And the naughty step and you know, making kids eat their dinner and that kind of thing. I mean, you could never, I don't know if those shows would be popular now. I wonder if there's going to be a backlash and those types of shows are going to be popular again. Because it seems to me, and I understand they were reality shows and there were parents who came out once their episode would air, and they'd say that they got a bad edit, and they'd say that a lot of the scenes were staged and that their kids weren't really that badly behaved, or that the producers would try to get the kids all worked up and behaving especially badly by not allowing them to go outside all day and not allowing them to get on their computers or watch TV or play with their, you know, video game consoles or whatever. And so the kids were bouncing off the walls and they were very unhappy, and so it made it look like the kids were completely out of control, whereas on a daily basis they weren't that badly behaved. And it's TV. I mean, you have to play it up for views. But there was a lot of benefit in what those women taught those parents. And now we're seeing the complete opposite, which is instead of telling the kids to come to the table, sit down and eat their dinner, or get dressed and go to school, or you're going to sit for an hour and you're going to do this, this, and this, or something like that. Or if you misbehave and you keep on throwing temper tantrums, you're going to have to sit down and be quiet for X amount of minutes until you calm down, and then we're going to have a conversation. Now it's like nothing. and their behavior is carrying into the school, and eventually that behavior is going to carry over to their employment. And that's going to be a problem, because that's when people start to get fired. And for the first time in a lot of these kids' lives, they're going to hear the word no. And it's going to come with a cost attached to it. You lose your income. And we don't want it to get to that point. We don't want it to get to the point where you're that old, and for the first time in your life, you're being told that there are consequences for your actions. That's something you should learn when you're very, very young.
That's it. There's no tantrum. There's no, I don't feel like learning English. We're learning English. We're in English, period. Like, that's it. That's all. I think some of these parents just aren't active in their children's lives. They're not paying attention to their education. But then again, they're also not disciplining them or setting any boundaries. But then when the teacher comes up to them and tells them, oh, your kid did this, that, and the third, they can't be bothered to hold their kids accountable. So I think a lot of the problems do start at home. The parents honestly have a lot to play in the way that teachers end up quitting, because it's their kids that have a direct effect on that teacher running out, that teacher deciding that this profession isn't for them. I do think they have a responsibility to make sure that their kids are prepared for what it means to respect your teacher.
Right.
What is being done to help these teachers? Right now, we're seeing that they're filling a lot of these jobs with underqualified teachers. It's just teachers that shouldn't really be working that job, and they end up having to work it because they don't have enough qualified candidates applying for the position. And so we're also seeing that a lot of these issues vary from state to state. Some of the states with the highest vacancies are Florida, Illinois, and Arizona. And the states with lower vacancies are Utah, Missouri, and Nebraska. And so let's see what Florida's doing to remedy the situation.
Florida has
in a bid
shortage.
to combat the shortage, some school districts in Florida are offering salary increases, signing bonuses, and mentoring programs for new teachers. The state also supports alternative teacher certification programs that get qualified professionals into classrooms quickly. They're giving them more pay, they're giving them these signing bonuses, but sometimes the pay is not enough. And also, since a lot of these schools are ran by the state, there's only so much that the school is able to give them. And some other articles I've read that they're also running out of some of the money that they are using to give these teachers bonuses, and compared to a doctor who, again, has a high stress job and they're getting paid six figures. That's kind of what keeps them there. And teachers make around $66,000 on average. And that's on the higher end. On the lower end, they're making $44,000. A lot of times they're not making enough to live, to buy a house, to buy.
Do you know what a substitute teacher gets paid here? Guess how much a substitute teacher gets paid here? $13 an hour. So even if I had been willing to apply for the license, go through the whole process, apply for the job that I was encouraged to apply for, the English teacher position at the high school, I think that my salary would have been around $22,000 a year. Maybe a tad bit higher, but not by much. I haven't made $20-something thousand a year since the 1990s. And it was considered a low salary in the 90s too. So any dreams that I might have had of maybe going to the high school and boosting literacy and all that as a substitute teacher, look, I was a kid. I remember how we treated our substitute teachers. We brutalized them. You know, we did. And I think that that's a standard response to a substitute teacher walking into the classroom anywhere, in any state, in any part of the country. And for $13 an hour, you're goddamn right that I am not getting out of bed for that. No way. But there is no incentive. And the standards for applying for a teaching license are very low in Indiana. They're very, very low. So, I mean, in some cases, what I've seen is you don't even have to have a mastery of the subject that you're hired to teach. You know, that's why as much as people tease me about my appearance at the school board meeting, when I went to the back to speak to some of the members of the board privately, and I had told them that I was interested in teaching, and they heard that I had a college degree, they couldn't believe it. They were like, oh my God, you have an actual English degree? Oh my God, let me tell you what's available. They didn't care how I dressed or that my hair was a mess. All that they cared about was that I had an English degree, because that is so rare around here. This is a very poor town in a remote part of Indiana, a state that doesn't have enough funding for teaching. There's a lot of funding for sports. This is a sports crazed state, as you all know. It's a state that gave us Bobby Knight. So there's always plenty of money for athletics, but when it comes to the classroom, forget it. So it's grim. The $66,000 a year, that is a pipe dream. Are you kidding?
Buy groceries to take care of themselves and their families. So I don't know if this incentive is going to be enough. And Texas is doing something really interesting. They have a teacher homebuyer incentive program to retain educators. They are essentially giving a down payment assistance or a forgivable loan to first-time homebuyer teachers in exchange for a commitment to work in a public school district for a certain period. This also seems like something that they do like in certain areas where teachers don't want to work. They will incentivize you by giving you like a huge bonus, but you have to commit a certain amount of time to that district. And so with this homebuyer thing, it's the same type of deal going on. It's like, okay, we'll give you this potentially free down payment, but now you have to stay here. So you could be getting hit, bit, staplers, knocked out, you, like abused, and you're gonna have to stay because you took this money. But that's not addressing the issues in the classroom that's going on with the behavior of these students, as well as the parents not taking responsibility, the school not taking responsibility to help these teachers. And so these issues are still persisting. I don't think throwing money or making teachers speed through schooling is really the answer. It's putting a Band-Aid over a much deeper issue. That's pretty much what we're seeing with the whole teaching situation in schools. It looks very grim. It's very sad to see that teachers are being so disrespected and that kids are just so unruly and feel so comfortable disrespecting authority figures. And although they're trying to do things, I think a lot of it falls on the parents' shoulders, because a lot of the reasons these teachers quit is because of the kids' behavior. So it's on parents to make sure that they're teaching their kids proper manners, discipline. If that can happen, then we can get back to actually educating instead of teachers having to parent in the classroom and taking up all the time doing that. It goes down to the federal as well as the state government to make sure that something is put in place so that these teachers just feel more comfortable and like they're valued. They are the backbone. They're right up there with the doctors. They're right up there with the nurses.
I agree.
They have a very important job, and you can't really live without teachers. Tell me what you guys think in the comments.
I think you're a great content creator. That's what I think. I think you're terrific. Everybody, please go sub up to her. She's wonderful. She does great content. So this is what happens when you have a fresh new feed on a fresh new channel. You end up with this amazing content from people you've never heard of, and it's great. And I really love seeing young content creators who are focusing on important issues. It makes me feel happy. Now on to the next story. Speaking of young content creators, how many of you, this goes back a few years, probably to around 2015, 2016, how many of you remember a content creator called Roaming Millennial? Roaming Millennial was a very beautiful, very attractive young Chinese American or half Chinese American girl, or Canadian, actually, she's Canadian, who started a YouTube channel, and she was part of that anti-SJW wave. So she was in the same league as like Sargon of Akkad and some of these other content creators. And she stood out because she was so lovely and so articulate, and she was a minority, but she didn't, you know, jump on to the victimhood pyramid and that kind of thing. She was a breath of fresh air. Well, hi, Judy. Well, Roaming Millennial is a girl named Lauren Chen, and she is in a lot of trouble right now. An absolutely amazing indictment dropped from the Justice Department. She was not indicted, but her husband, she and her husband are in a lot of trouble. a lot of trouble. And I saw, hey, Marchioness, and I saw Sargon of Akkad out there with some horrible ice cold take on this matter, which is equal parts farcical and serious. So it turns out, thank you, Capone. It turns out that Lauren Chen and her husband took a lot of money that ended up being laundered money from two Russian, dare I call them, spooks. They were affiliated with RT, Russia Today, which was a channel that Lauren Chen had previously been a contributor for. Russia Today is a propaganda channel with talking points issued by the Kremlin. And it made some inroads with the hard left. There were hard left people who really loved Russia Today and thought that, it was great and very honest. And no, it isn't. Russia Today is as shitty as Al Jazeera or Press TV or any of those organizations. Now, the problem is that Lauren Chen and her husband had a company where they hired as contributors some very well-known commentators, including Tim Pool, including Lauren Southern, including David Rubin, and several others. And they were paying these people, specifically Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, absolutely obscene amounts of money to produce content on YouTube. And I do mean obscene amounts of money. Obscene. Tim Pool was getting upwards of $100,000 per video. And when you read the indictment, you see that this is so bad. You know what? I'm not gonna keep on talking because Megyn Kelly did a really good segment on it, and so I'll let her talk because she's a lawyer and she can walk us through it. There will be points that I disagree with, but I think that overall her take was quite good. So let's go ahead and give it a listen.
Going on, Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. My God, do we have a lot to get to today?
Yeah.
We begin with some legal news that's making major waves overnight. Actually, before we get to that, you should know that there's even bigger news, and that is that Hunter Biden has now agreed to change his plea to guilty.
Who cares?
In these in this
doesn't
tax
matter. No one
charges
gives a shit.
case against him in order to avoid caught him trying to give Hunter an enormous sweetheart plea deal.
Yeah.
And we knew it was coming out yesterday with a major announcement. And when we closed the show yesterday, we said, we'll cover it for you. And our guest tomorrow will be Dave Rubin. Well, imagine our surprise when later that day, the DOJ announced that its case is not against Dave Rubin. Maybe I need to be perfectly clear about that, nor is he accused of doing anything criminal or wrong.
However,
he in fact is one of the victims of this scheme that the DOJ alleged in great detail yesterday.
Dave Rubin is not a motherfucking victim. Could we please stop? Tim Pool has been going out there whining about how he's a victim. They're not named in the indictment. They're not named. None of the content creators that appeared on Lauren Chen's YouTube account, which has now been terminated, by the way. Tenet Media is gone, and she's been fired from The Blaze. So, no, they're not victims. They made out like bandits. Come on, let's stop, okay?
He, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and other conservative media personalities you likely know well. They've all been swept up in this Department of Justice indictment announced last night, not against them, but against two Russians, a male and a female, for their involvement in creating an independent media company that used the podcast feeds and services of these big names in order to amplify their own channel called Tenet Media. And the whole thing turned out to be covertly funded by Russian media organization RT.
Okay, let's not mince words here. It was basically a money laundering operation run by two, dare I say, spooks who reached out to Lauren Chen and her husband. $10 million. $10 million. And people like Sargon and others are saying, well, it's not really a big deal because they're just being they're being singled out for not abiding by FARA, which is the Foreign Agency Registration Act. If you are a lobbyist, if you run any kind of a company where you are basically putting forward a message on behalf of a foreign government, or you are representing a foreign government in any way, you need to register with the Justice Department. And it's not a difficult registration process, by the way. It's very simple. I had to register an associate of my ex-husband's with FARA. And all that means is the Justice Department is aware that you are taking money from a foreign source. That's all. That's all. FARA indictments, violation of FARA is not a very common occurrence in Washington, but when it does happen, it happens with a vengeance. The last time I saw a FARA indictment like this was a guy who was lobbying on behalf of Kashmir and taking money from Pakistani intelligence and not declaring it. Well, you know, what a surprise. So, I don't know who Benny Johnson is. That was the first time I'd ever heard of him. I've heard of, Matt Christensen was another one who was involved in this media company. And him I know, and I know the others, but I've never heard of Benny Johnson. But anyway, I see that my internet is getting wacky. I'm sorry. We were told by the internet company just yesterday that they have been having outages in our area, but let's continue.
So alleges the Department of Justice. It's a complicated case that is unsurprisingly not being covered honestly so far by the corporate press, but I'm just going to lay it out for you quickly, relatively quickly. Okay, so here's the deal. The DOJ is alleging that these two Russians who worked for RT, I mean, that does matter, but it's really the fact that they're in Russia and they're Russian and they're pushing Russian interests. What they did was they called their friend Lauren Chen. Right. Now, she is a Canadian citizen who's living and working in America, I believe living here too, but definitely working in America for, among others, The Blaze.
Not anymore.
And she's a relatively well-known conservative personality online. I will say she's a troll. I unfollowed her a while ago because it was obvious this is not a person worth listening to on X. So they contacted Lauren Chen because, unbeknownst to me, she had worked for RT for a year.
Yeah, she did.
As a commentator.
She sure did.
Apparently on the air, but at least writing articles for them.
Yep.
So openly affiliating with this channel. Now, it's not that RT, it's definitely state-run media. It is with Russia. I mean, good luck finding them doing anything critical of Vladimir Putin. Trust me.
Right.
They try to get more and more influence in the United States. They've had people reach out to me many times to try to get me to do something. It's a no. Okay, they know that by this point.
Yeah, I've gotten, I many years ago, like 20 years ago, I too was, maybe 15 years ago, I don't remember, I too was getting contacted by RT. They were looking to build up their Washington operation with legitimate journalists. They weren't going to fly Ivan and Vladimir and Natasha over from Russia. They wanted to get actual bona fide American journalists to work as producers and on-air personalities and so on. And RT at that time was located in the same building at 400 North Capitol as Fox News Channel, MSNBC, C-SPAN, and I think that there may be a couple of other media organizations there. But RT had a presence in that building. So RT is a very insidious corporation. A very insidious news channel. And it was very, very worrisome to me that RT was making such inroads with the hard left and with college students, you know, young people, who were looking at this material that was being broadcast on RT, and they were completely, they were buying everything that RT was selling. So RT produced such luminaries as Abby Martin, who then went on to work for Venezuelan television. Abby Martin, who is a lunatic, anti-Semite, and conspiracy theorist, a 9/11 denier, among her more, her positive qualities. So imagine what her negative ones are. They're substantial. But that was RT. That's the kind of person that they ended up bringing on board, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So let's continue.
But in this case, they did reach out to Lauren, according to this indictment, and said, help us form a new independent media company and help us find influencers who will work for it. And according to the indictment, she did. She and her husband both did that and recruited guys like Dave and Tim Pool and Benny and 3 others I never heard of. And she, according to the indictment, knew that the Russians would be funding this and editing content, but the influencers, the conservative podcasters, did not. And that's according to the indictment.
That's correct.
That's why none of them has been indicted. The feds are saying Rubin, Poole, Benny, they didn't know. They were not told. In fact, they were given misinformation by Lauren because they allege she knew they would never do this if they understood it was being funded by the Russians. She told them that it was all being funded by some French businessman, Edouard Grigorian.
With 2 N's,
And the indictment alleges that both Tim and Dave, I don't know about the others, tried to kick the tires a bit, obviously not enough, on who this is. Who's Edouard Grigorian? And they wanted to see like a profile of the guy. All that was forwarded was a LinkedIn, which appears obviously to have been fake. And then Dave Rubin is, according to the indictment, the guy who pushed more and said, like, this isn't enough. And then they created this whole fake profile of this guy, Edouard Grigorian, that's like pretty fancy. I'm holding it up for the listening audience, and you can see, frankly, it looks a little obviously stock picture at the top of some vaguely attractive man looking out a window of a private jet. And then it's got all sorts of fawning descriptions about the guy. And Dave apparently did push back even after that, saying, I'm not sure about this guy. It says he's into social justice. Why is he looking for me? Anyway, there was some pushback. But here's the bottom line.
Not really, no.
They were offering eye-popping sums to these influencers, and they took the deal.
They sure did.
According to the indictment, Dave was offered some number, and he went back and said, I'm not getting involved with this. And he didn't do anything really extraordinary for them. He was doing something like viral videos, and aren't they funny? Ha, 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 for a few months. But for that, they were willing to pay him $400,000 a month.
$400,000 a month. Look, I know that Megyn Kelly likes Dave Rubin. I get it. And I know that a lot of people like Dave Rubin. I started watching Dave Rubin when he first launched the Rubin Report years ago. I was a huge fan. You know, I had notifications ready, and every time that a new interview or a new segment would pop up, I would be there. I had my Rubin Report t-shirt that I wore around DC, and I remember one time I was at the post office and some guy was standing in line. He's like, wow, the Rubin Report. I liked that guy and I enjoyed him. It was great content to watch when I was at the dog park, when I had lots of time on my hands. Having said that, in my opinion, over the years, Dave Rubin has become the equivalent, not of the high-end escort girlfriend experience, but the back page hooker. Dave Rubin has no firm beliefs on anything. That is my opinion. I think that Dave Rubin is one of those people who holds his finger up to the wind to see which way it's blowing in his particular circle. I lost respect for him a long time ago because, I'm sorry, I don't care how much you hate the left. We can all hate the left. I mean, I sure do. I get it. But to then try to pretend that Donald Trump is without fault is ridiculous. That is not an honest point of view. It is not an honest point of view for any politician. It is absurd. And I'm sorry, when you are getting paid $400,000 a month to do minimal work, wouldn't you start to wonder where all this money is coming from and why is it that you're being paid so much? And evidently, this Gregorian guy was made up. He didn't exist. And you guys who all pride yourselves on being these top-notch commentators and journalists and everything else, and nobody bothered to do a deep dive or check where the money was coming from. If somebody was throwing that kind of money at me, I would be concerned that it was illegal money. It was money coming from a dirty source. Drugs, money laundering, espionage, bribery, whatever. I would be concerned about that. $400,000 a month is a lot of money. And $100,000 a video, Tim, is a lot of money. A lot of money. And that is on top of whatever he was making on YouTube and AdSense and memberships and whatever the hell else he has. Let's continue.
Every month for a year, plus a signing bonus, plus another bonus. So we're talking about, between $5 and $6 million for 1 year.
For nothing.
And Tim Pool reportedly, well, according to the indictment, was charging $100,000 per video, per week. He would post something, I guess, once a week.
That's, again, $100,000 a week. I want to emphasize, just like she said, these people are not named in the indictment. The indictment is an indictment of the Russians. The Russians are indicted. But it doesn't make anyone involved in this look good, especially Lauren Chen.
Which would be in a similar ballpark. Now, I will tell you, in the podcast world, those are jaw-dropping sums.
Hey, ATX.
And I'm sure people will make the argument they should have known.
Well,
my
they should
friend
have
Jim
asked
Garrity's
questions.
making that argument right now over at National Review, and others will make that same argument. But I can tell you personally that I've known Dave for a long time, and there is zero chance that he knew anything about this. We had a conversation a year ago, he and I can disclose this, in which he mentioned this in passing. This wasn't like our main point, but he mentioned this. And he told me, I said, who's funding this? And he said, it's a French businessman. And Dave would have no reason to lie to me that he said that explicitly. And not for nothing, but the conversation went on. And I will tell you that I told him not to do it. And that was not necessarily because I knew anything about the funding. We didn't get into that more than him saying it was his French guy. But I don't have good feelings about this Lauren Chen. And I was right. And I'm sorry that Dave got swept up in this. And I'm sorry Tim did. I don't know Benny, but, I do think these guys are right that they were the victims in this scheme. And sure, you can say they should have known. I get it. But you guys know I did that fraud series over my June vacation. And I, too, was almost defrauded. It was a totally different scheme. It was like some guy trying to convince us that my mother-in-law, trying to convince her that her daughter had been in a car accident, pay money and all that. You should check the episode out. It's actually really good. But I understand it's very easy with 2020 hindsight to say they should have known. Anyway, the question now is, what does this indictment mean? Because they claim that there's a wider reach than just this podcast network. And they also don't say that Lauren and her husband, Liam Donovan, not to be confused with the Liam Donovan who's very prolific on Twitter, who's all out there saying that it's not me, it's different Liam Donovan. What about them? They are not indicted per this document, though that doesn't mean it hasn't happened in secret.
Right.
And that they've potentially turned against these two Russians and are cooperating with them. But I will tell you, when you read this indictment, for sure these two Russians seem like the villains, and Lauren and her husband do not come off much better.
No.
We'll see what their defense is. So far, they've said nothing, and I'll get more into detail on what the podcasters are saying in their own defense in 1 second. Okay, joining me now to discuss, Joel Pollack. He's author of the new book, The Agenda, What Trump Should Do in His First 100 Days, and Dave Ehrenberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, and host of True Crime MTN on YouTube. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. I want to tell you about the Daily Wire's documentary that is you're an actual criminal prosecutor in Palm Beach. So I'll ask you first, what do you make of my summary of these allegations, and how troubling do you find them?
Troubling, and I think you're spot on, Megan, especially when you're talking about Lauren Chen. Lauren Chen was pretty normal for a while, and then she started taking money from Russia, apparently around 2012 21. And then all of a sudden she started complaining about the influence of Jews in political life and AIPAC and how they were controlling the agenda. What sounds like projecting to me, right? The whole.
Okay. What that sounds like to me is Candace Owens. It's amazing, isn't it? Lauren Chen made an abrupt U-turn in terms of her worldview right around the time the 10 million bucks fell into her lap from 2 Russians. I don't believe in coincidences. That's why when I see what Candace Owens is up to now, I don't believe in coincidences there either. I don't believe that her sudden change of opinion has anything to do with her conversion to Catholicism. I think that's bullshit. I think that we need to take a look at who is funding her. Because one of the things that we have noticed is that any time that you have these popular online personalities who suddenly become extremely anti-Semitic and take on, it's almost like a checklist of opinions that they change overnight, that there's some kind of outside influence at work. Now, Candace Owens has covered herself in shame by being a defender of the Tate brothers and a defender of Kanye West and all that kind of stuff. So you could sort of see it building slowly. But she's sitting right now in a very cushy studio, and I get it. Her husband is very wealthy. I understand that. He's the founder of Parler, I believe. And he comes from a very wealthy British family. But somebody is writing her checks. You do not stick your neck out the way that Candace Owens has and come out with these outrageous opinions that are getting darker and darker and darker by the day, signing on to every conspiracy theory known to man. I think that the only thing that she's left out so far is the flat earth theory. But she's signed on to everything. And again, you cannot blame Catholicism for this. It's something else. Somebody is behind her. Somebody is financing her besides her husband and his family. Trust me on this. This is exactly what happened to Lauren Chen in 2021, and now we're seeing it with Candace Owens. It is not a coincidence that they're both good-looking women who are minorities and that they were targeted. Again, I have no proof that Candace Owens is taking money from some foreign entity, but I just think it's a little bit too much of a coincidence for me. Because her flip has been so incredibly extreme that there's got to be something behind it.
Whole dual loyalty thing. All of a sudden, she started being one of the more prominent anti-Semites on social media. So I have no sympathy for her, and hopefully she'll be held accountable in all this. And you're right to call her out. As far as the others, you know, I worry about, like with Tim Pool, for example, he was issuing broadsides against Ukraine, saying Ukraine was the biggest enemy of the United States. You're wondering, where did this come from? Well, you have to wonder, you know, was he a useful idiot for Russia? The government said he wasn't a Russian agent. They didn't indict him for anything, but they're sort of accusing him of being useful idiots, where they are promoting.
Yeah, Tim Pool is too stupid to be a Russian agent. But you guys, if you want to learn more about Tim Pool, you need to go back and take a look at some of the articles that were written about him a few years ago, mostly in the Daily Beast, that were hilarious, about how Tim Pool had always portrayed himself. And this is how I first found him, when he was going to the no-go zones in Sweden, for example. And I thought, wow, that's great reporting. That's really cool. And then you come to find out that he takes credit for other people's work. He actually is not what he appears to be. He's actually something of a coward. And he gets a lot of help with what he does. And this is the old days. This is when he was still doing, man in the street interviews and going to different places and filming and all that. When he was still a nobody, he was just kind of a breakout person. But Tim Pool is a giant fraud. He's not terribly clever. And anyone who would try to recruit him would be incredibly stupid, although he has a huge audience, and that is a big, big bonus. And it's a huge audience that is willing to believe pretty much anything that comes out of his mouth.
Russian propaganda. Now, all of a sudden, I've seen social media where he's backing down from that and saying, well, I've switched on Ukraine. I don't know if that's real or not, but it's really suspicious. And I'm glad the government's doing this and that they were unafraid to do this close to the election. I'm actually a little surprised because Merrick Garland is not known for his courage. He's known for his timidity. And here we are with this. And for those who think this is political, they could have indicted people, perhaps if they really wanted to get political. They did not. You were correct, Megan, how you phrased this. So it's an important issue. It is troubling, and we should all be talking about it today, as you are.
But before I get Joel's reaction to that, Dave, it's very odd that Lauren and her husband are not named as of the targets to the indicted defendants. So, and there's no way the government doesn't think it has the ability to do that against them.
Lauren Southern is part of that group of influencers, of commentators, but she has not gotten any heat, and neither has Matt Christensen. So I don't know why. But again, none of the content creators were named, and neither was Lauren Chen or her husband. It's just the two Russians who were indicted. Let's continue.
If you read the indictment, they're really among the top villains, and they make very clear that they believe Lauren and her husband, they have them dead rights. They believe, unknowing this was Russian money and that they were acting as agents of Russia and that they were hiding it from the podcasters. So you tell me, as a DA, what do you think is happening behind the scenes here? Because those are like the only two who haven't issued a statement.
Right. Well, that is telling. That could mean they're cooperating or in discussions to cooperate. I don't know if they've been issued a target letter. The feds keep things
Could they
close
have been
to the vest.
indicted? Could they already have been indicted secretly and cut a deal to work with the feds?
They could have cut a deal. I think that a secret indictment is unlikely. I think that they could have cut a deal, yes. The feds are uniquely private about these things. This is something that we're different at the state level. We're public about everything. The feds do work in secret, but you have to wonder, why would they do a secret indictment? They would go ahead and they would indict, or they would be talking to them, issuing them a target letter, and then negotiating with them. Perhaps they have flipped already, because it is very conspicuous by her silence.
Yep.
So you don't need to indict them, is your point, to get them to cooperate. The DOJ, the FBI shows up and says, you're going to be indicted, and here's all the evidence we have against you. And clearly they've been monitoring their emails and their communications for months now. It's like they know where this is leading, and most people would probably cut a deal because they'd be terrified.
Yeah, exactly. The feds usually get their person because, unlike the state, they've got really draconian penalties, unlimited resources, limited discovery for defendants, and that's why they win about 98% of their cases. And unless your name is Mark Cuban, you're likely going down. So it's probably good to cooperate early on.
Okay, Joel.
And that's why, this is an aside, but that's why suing a federal agency, if you've got an employment dispute, is a huge uphill battle. VOA had the distinction of having to pay out $500 million in the largest sex discrimination judgment in American history at that time. I don't know if there's been a bigger one, but it was the biggest at the time. And one of the things that came out as a result of it was, first of all, they have unlimited resources. They have lawyers on staff who are paid to work on these cases. They're not billing by the hour. They are government employees, whereas you have to hire your own attorney to make your case. Very, 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 very expensive. They can drag it out for years and spend you out of the lawsuit. This is one of the reasons why I made a decision not to sue Fox over that press release. Because I've seen how dirty companies are and how dirty federal agencies are when it comes to potentially ruinous lawsuits or anything that involves paying out money. One of the things that came out in the Hartman case, and I don't know if this was public or if this was just known around the agency, was that when the women filed the class action suit, that the head of human resources was in his office day and night shredding evidence. He was destroying evidence day and night. He was shredding emails, he was shredding employment records, he was shredding everything. in a blatant violation of the law. So if a federal agency can do that, imagine what a private company can do with your employment history, with your employment records, with reports, with anything. And then you're fucked, because if you don't have copies of everything in your hand and discovery starts and they're like, well, we don't have anything, then what are you going to do about it? You know, then you're stuck. So, yeah, that's the problem with the feds. If there was an indictment that came down like that, and I was sort of tangentially mentioned, or I wasn't mentioned at all, but I knew that they were going to be breathing down my neck, you are goddamn right. I would be down at the Justice Department headquarters the next day offering to sing like a bird. Fuck that. I would be hiring the best lawyer in Washington, and I would be cutting a deal. So, anyway, all right. I think that we've gotten the picture. It's an amazing case. If you look up Lauren Chen, you'll see that a few people have commented on it. I think that people are still reading through the indictment and digesting it. And because Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, Matt Christensen, that Benny Johnson guy, and Lauren Chen and her husband, Liam Donovan, are not mentioned by name, there are those who are like, okay, well, then they didn't do anything or they didn't know anything. That's bullshit. If you read the indictment and you see the communications that the Russians had with Lauren Chen, it is cringeworthy. Let me put it this way. It is not Tinker Tailor, okay? This is not like Toby Esterhazy and his lamplighters and George Smiley and spies on that level, or his greatest nemesis, Carla, on the Russian side. It's not like that. It is bumbling and ridiculous and entirely driven by greed, and this arrogance that nobody is going to get caught. It's incredibly embarrassing, but this is one of the reasons why I never considered working for RT or for any foreign broadcaster apart from no foreign broadcasters from a totalitarian state with no media freedom, because those broadcast organizations are propaganda mills. Now, Abby Martin doesn't care because she signed on with all that shit. And she went from working for Russia to Venezuela. What does that tell you? But there are some people, there were anchors who worked for RT who quit quite publicly and made it abundantly clear that the reason that they were leaving was because they could not report what they thought needed to be reported. No criticism of Putin, no criticism of anything that was going on in the Kremlin, no honesty. It was all bullshit. And they quit because they couldn't do it anymore. So, all right, you guys, thank you for being here. I hope you all learned something today. And I appreciate all of you, and I want to thank you all again for subscribing, for your incredible generosity towards myself and Negs. Thank you for the Cash Apps and everything. I didn't run the scroll today, but if you're inclined to donate, the information is in the description box. So once again, thank you so much, and I will see you guys the next time.